WBS process. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, one more process. We have finished 3 processes in scope management in predictive projects. We're still in planning phase, and now we're going to dive into details of Create WBS process. Okay, we did plan scope management. That's why it's red. We did collect requirements. We did define scope, and now it's time to do Create WBS process. So what exactly we will do? It's simple, guys. From scope statement, which we created as a result of define scope process, previous process, okay, we have high-level deliverables. In this process, we break those high-level deliverables down and create smaller chunk of works called work packages, okay? Why we break them down? Because smaller works are trackable, assignable, plannable, controllable, manageable. With big chunk of works, those big deliverables, there are lots of unknowns. We cannot assign an employee and say, hey, you know what, go and build 500 parking spaces for me. No, we need to break that down. That's why this process exists, okay? So you, as always, you throw a meeting with your team and extract the necessary information from some of the relevant existing docs, artifacts, conditions, which we call them what? Inputs. Great. The most important inputs of this process is scope statement. Scope statement was output of define scope. Now it is input of Create WBS process. Scope management plan, requirements management plan, requirement list, EEF, OPA. These are inputs that we review and consider when doing this process. Then, to analyze, interpret, and transform those extracted information to insights, we apply the right tools, techniques, methods, or models, okay? As always, we use expert judgment for Create WBS and a new tool and technique called decomposition. We use decomposition to break down those deliverables, okay? It's a cool tool that we're gonna dive into. And finally, as a result of reviewing our inputs and applying different tools and techniques in this process, we're gonna create 3 documents. Number 1, work breakdown structure, or WBS. Number 2, WBS Dictionary. Number 3, scope baseline. Okay, these 3 are outputs, are documents that we're gonna create by doing Create WBS process. Okay, cool. Now let's dive into inputs and how reviewing a scope statement helps us in Create WBS process. The first input, scope management plan, how-to guide when dealing with scope. So guys, here in Create WBS, we said we're gonna break down those high-level deliverables into smaller works, okay? Scope management plan guides us to what level you should break down the deliverables, how detailed those breakdowns should be. You as a PM and your team review a scope management plan. The section relates to WBS and how to break down those deliverables, and the level that you need to break down those deliverables is mentioned, okay? You cannot break down deliverables as much as you want. No, there is a rule, there is an instruction that you need to follow, and that instruction is mentioned in a scope management plan. That's why we have how-to guide for each part of our project. Let's review the example. For example, a scope management plan says work will be broken down by major departments, ER, ICU, diagnostics, with at least 3 levels of detail. See, this is the instruction. This is how to guide when dealing with a scope, because WBS is related to scope. So we extract that information from scope management plan as the WBS structure guidelines, okay? And the PM builds the WBS with that layout. So scope management plan provides us guidelines on how building WBS. This is how it works as an input. The next input, or I, is scope statement. And I think it's obvious how it helps us. What do you want to do in this process? You want to break those deliverables down, okay? Where are those deliverables mentioned? in a scope statement, of course. So you're going to review a scope statement and you're going to use those high level deliverables as your level 1 or level 2, for example. Okay, you're going to see one WBS in the outputs, and you're going to see that the deliverables that are mentioned in a scope statements are also mentioned in WBS as the highest level. Okay, so scope statements acts as our starting point. And feel free to review the example. I'm gonna save some time here. The next outputs are, of course, EEF and OPA. EF are those regulations that our project needs to follow, external regulations and policies and conditions. And OPA are internal templates, checklists, lessons learned register. But how EEF works as input in Create WBS process. For example, EF says all healthcare construction projects must use government WBS coding, because we have some codes in WBS. You're gonna see. By codes, I mean numbers, okay? 1, 2, 3. There is a specific coding that we need to use when dealing with healthcare projects. Government says that this is EEF, so we need to follow that. We need to consider that when creating our WBS. This is how EEF works here. And OPA, we may have a template for WBS from previous hospital projects. We can use those template or we can extract some part of that template, because WBS is a structure, it's a framework, it's kind of a chart. Okay, you don't want to start and building WBS from scratch. You can use those templates. And where are those templates? In our organization's repository. Okay, it's considered an OPA. Great. These were inputs and how they helped us in Create WBS process. Now let's get into TTs and decomposition. All right. Now, tools and techniques of Create WBS process. The first one is, as usual, expert judgment. We know that it's using expert experience and knowledge to structure and organize the project's work. For example, let's elaborate with an example. For example, experts suggest splitting deliverable 1.4. This is our deliverable, which is called inpatient care facility. Okay. SME or expert comes to you and says, hey, break down this deliverable into these 3 work packages. For example, patient rooms, nursing stations, and utilities and medical gas system. Okay, so you use that expert's input, because that input helps you to develop a clear and complete WBS. The next one is decomposition. Guys, decomposition is act of those breaking large project deliverables into smaller, more manageable piece of work. Okay, this is the definition of decomposition. Breaking down. Okay, so how it works. We start with the main deliverable from the scope statement. We open up scope statement. We go to the list of deliverables. Now, we break each one of those deliverables into smaller logical components called sub-deliverables. Okay, we keep doing this, keep breaking down, keep decomposing until each work package, each work is clear, measurable, and assignable. This is important. Clear, measurable, and assignable. Okay, and then review the full WBS with the stakeholders to confirm completeness. There is a rule called 100% rule in WBS. What does that mean? It means all of the works that stakeholders need, and we promise them that we will deliver that work in scope statement, needs to be in the WBS. You need to go and talk to sponsors and show the WBS to them and get their approval before starting the work. Okay, this is key. So this is how decomposition work. It's just act of breaking those deliverables down into smaller pieces, smaller manageable and measurable and assignable pieces. Great. And you may say, okay, Nav, what type of question I may get from these 2 stupid tools and techniques? These look obvious. You'll see in a sec. Now my favorite part, mini question. You are a PM in predictive project, okay? Our development approach is predictive project. Cool, they mention it. The team has an approved scope statement and a requirement list. This is a good hint, okay? But cost and duration estimates are inconsistent across departments. Okay. You notice that teams are using different interpretation of the same deliverables and work packages are not clearly defined, leading to overlapping responsibilities. Before developing the schedule or assigning resources, you decide to apply a technique that will ensure the team has a shared understanding of all deliverables and the boundaries of each work package. What should you do next? A. Work with the team to decompose the project deliverables into detailed work packages within a structured WBS. B. Facilitate workshops to collect additional requirements and resolve gaps in stakeholder expectations. Nice. C. Refine the project charter to include clearer deliverable descriptions and acceptance criteria. D. Update the requirements traceability matrix to link each requirement with its corresponding deliverable. And guys, remember, okay, we talked about decomposition in the previous mini lessons, but it doesn't mean that this question's answer is also decomposition. No, don't think that way, okay? Because we covered all of other options before. That's why I have included them. So don't think that way, please. Take your time, pause the video, and try to solve it yourself. Now that you have unpaused, let's get it done together. The correct option is A, guys. Yeah, tricked you. But why A? Let's go line by line. As always, let's learn something from this question. Please give us something. Okay, it's a predictive project, okay? Questions rarely say what type of development approach that we use or the project uses, but this question says it, and it's nice, predictive project. So it's process-based, okay? We need to do the things in the right order. The team has an approved scope statement and a requirement list. So we have done collect requirement process. Approved scope statement means we have done define a scope. This is a sign. And but the thing is, cost and duration estimates are inconsistent across departments. This is concern, okay? Why it's inconsistent? We said that we do WBS, we break down those high-level deliverables into smaller pieces to make them estimatable, to make them manageable, controllable, measurable, okay? When different teams interpret one deliverable differently, it means that we haven't decomposed it yet. If we have decomposed it, we didn't do it in a right way, okay? That's why there is a concern in the team. Also, there is concern that teams are using different interpretation of same deliverable and work packages are not clearly defined. Okay? So we need a tool to clearly define work packages. And that tool is WBS. We need to decompose those high-level deliverables. And if we don't decompose in a right way, okay, we cannot assign different works to different people in a right way, okay? Maybe two teams will do same work, overlapping resources, okay? That's why we need to do the WBS in a right way. We need to decompose those high-level deliverables in a right way. So A is correct. In Create WBS, decomposition is the formal technique used to transform high-level deliverables into clearly defined work packages. It eliminates ambiguity, overlaps, and gaps, ensuring estimation, ownership, and accountabilities are possible. Okay, we break those down to do the estimation, to give ownership to others, okay, to make some people accountable for different tasks and works. It's performed after the scope statement and requirements are approved, but before scheduling or resourcing. Why before scheduling or resourcing? Because we need to know what work should we do and then start scheduling and assigning work and doing budgeting and stuff. Why other options are incorrect. B says facilitates workshop to collect additional requirements. Guys, we already facilitated workshop. We're not here to collect more requirement now in this stage, okay? So we already did that. It happened earlier, and at this stage, requirements are already approved. More collection would not fix unclear work definitions. The concern is unclear work packages, okay? Additional requirement wouldn't solve that. C, why C is incorrect. Refine the project charter to include clearer deliverables, descriptions, and acceptance criteria. First of all, editing and refining project charter happens very, very rarely, okay? We don't just throw a meeting and edit our project charter. No, we don't do that. It happens in a very, very rare situations, in situations that the organization's goal changes entirely, okay? In that case, okay, go ahead and change the charter. But for these small concerns, you don't go and change the charter. And remember, charter contains high-level goals only. Refinement here wouldn't solve detail-level confusion in executing, in planning. And D was update the requirements traceability matrix to link each requirements with its corresponding deliverables. Our concern is not requirement. Why would we update RTM? RTM is GPS tracker for our requirements. Now we are dealing with deliverable, those high-level scope, and smaller pieces of those high-level scopes, which were work packages. These are unclear. We need to deal with this issue, not requirements. So RTM is nonsense here. This was a very, very good question. Awesome. Now let's get into output of Create WBS process, and let's see how that WBS looks like. Hello, 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 my beautiful friend. Are you enjoying your coffee? I hope you're having a coffee, so I look like a magician here. You can see from screens. Okay, enough. Let's get back to our business of creating WBS. What was the name of the process? Create WBS. So we expect to create a document called WBS. And here we go. In this mini lesson, we're going to know how WBS looks like. Okay. So guys, let's recap. What was the goal? Breaking down those deliverables that are mentioned in the scope statement. Why we break them down? So we could assign, so we could estimate, control, manage our work, our scope better. Okay. This is how a typical WBS, a simple one, looks like for our hospital project, okay? It's a visual hierarchy showing how the total project scope is divided into smaller manageable parts, okay? So look at that blue rectangle. It says one is that WBS code we talked about before, okay? That's a code, one, okay? 1.0 is Northern Ontario Hospital Project. This is our project, okay? It's not a deliverable. It's our project's name or title. Then next level is our deliverables, okay? That white rectangles. So 1.1 is pharmacy and imaging labs. These are high-level deliverables that are mentioned in deliverable section of scope statement, okay? 1.2, project management plan. So these processes we do develop and create some plans. These are also considered deliverables. Okay, why? Because we need them to execute, to do our project. Without a plan, your project won't success. So these are also necessary. That's why in some projects, project management plans that we create, those X management plans for every piece of the project, or the baselines we create, also considered a deliverable. That's why it is mentioned project management, okay? Everything that relates to management, paper and system. Deliverable, the next deliverable is 1.3, parking facility. Every hospital needs a parking. That's a high-level deliverable. 1.4, inpatient care facility. It's another high-level deliverable. 1.5, training and transition. It is also called deliverable. So it's just short-listed, guys. A big hospital project could have 10 or 20 high-level deliverables, okay? All of those deliverables go to these white rectangles, okay? These are called level 1 of WBS chart. Now, we have our first level of WBS. That 1.0 Northern Ontario Hospital project, that's just project's name, okay? We don't consider that as a level of WBS. The first one is that high-level deliverables, which we exactly copy from scope statement. Now, we zoom on each deliverable, okay? We do decomposition, and we break those deliverables down into smaller works, okay? For example, guys, let's go to deliverable 1.4, which is inpatient care facility, okay? So we break that down into 1.4.1 ICU unit and 1.4.2 medical surgical unit, okay? So look at the WBS code of that red rectangles for ICU unit and medical surgical unit. It starts with 1.4. Now, look up there, inpatient care facility. 1.4 is WBS code of their parent deliverable, okay? Now, we start the second level with the same WBS code, and then we add numbers, 1 or 2, depending on the smaller works, okay? So these red rectangles are next level of WBS, okay? The first one was deliverable. Next one is called control accounts. Control accounts. It helps us to track our progress. PM, which is you always track your progress, your schedule, your cost, how the team doing, quality, risk, everything, okay? How do you track? By looking at how each control account doing, okay? For example, you look up ICU unit, because we're gonna break down those also control account into smaller pieces, okay? You're gonna look at the ICU unit and you're gonna see, okay, is ICU unit over budget, under budget, behind the schedule, or just on track? Now, look at ICU unit 1.4.1. That's one of our control accounts, okay? Again, we do decomposition. We decompose that into smaller works, which are called work packages, okay? So 1.4.1.1 is design work package, and then HVAC installation work package, and then, for example, testing work package. So we broke down control accounts into smaller works called work packages. We used the term work packages several times throughout this tutorial. This is work package. So work package is, guys, the smallest level of WBS. Okay, it won't go further than that. So we won't break down work WBS anymore here in this process, okay? You're gonna see something later in a schedule, but right now, all you care is work package is the smallest, I insist, smallest level of WBS. So first level was deliverable, next level was control account, and third level is work packages, smallest level, okay? This is how a typical standard WBS looks like, guys. Let's review colors again. White color, a deliverable, big chunk of work, which we got it from scope statement, okay? So at the end of the project, you as a project manager, you need to show that deliverable to a sponsor, to your client. Client only cares about your deliverables, not that work packages. Work packages is your business. Okay, control accounts, your business. Customer doesn't care. You should take care of that project. That's why they're paying you. Now, next color is red color. We said it's a control account. A control account is a checkpoint in WBS used to monitor and control the scope, cost, and schedule for a group of related work. Okay, it's a checkpoint. It sits above work packages and it is assigned to a manager, okay? And it is used in monitoring and controlling and performance tracking. I'm going to elaborate with an example, don't worry. And finally, green color, we said it's a work package. It's the smallest unit in the WBS that can be assigned to someone, estimated for time, cost, and resources, okay? The whole purpose is to make work estimatable, assignable. Awesome. Let's wrap it up, guys. So WBS has 4 benefits to us, to our team. 1, we can assign people. We can assign each work package to like our employees, our workers. We can estimate time. Why? Because work packages are small enough so we could estimate how long each one will take. We can estimate cost. Okay, again, same thing as a schedule. It is a small, so we can know how much each work package will cost. And we can track progress. How? With control accounts. Let's elaborate with an example. That ICU unit control account. When ICU unit is broken into, for example, room design, HVAC installation, and compliance testing, these are 3 work packages, you can assign, for example, architects to design work package, okay? Engineers to install HVAC work package, inspectors to do testing. See, you can assign different employees, different departments to different work packages. That's why we say WBS helps us assign people. Now, estimate time. For example, instead of guessing how long build ICU will take, okay, build ICU is higher level, like control account level. How can you guess how long building ICU will take? It is better if we break them down and have clearer idea, okay? So the team can say design, for example, take 3 weeks, HVAC installation take 6 weeks, and then testing take 2 weeks, okay? Then 3 plus 6, 9 plus 2, 11. So total build ICU will take 11 weeks. See? It makes our life easier. Estimate cost. For example, we can say design take, for example, we can say ICU design, that work package, cost us 50K, HVAC 500K, testing 30K. Now we know that the build ICU control account will cost, for example, 580K. Okay, if we just wanted to guess, okay, without breaking down, okay, how much build ICU will cost us? I don't know. Yeah, you don't know. You need to break it down. Okay, now track progress. How it helps us to track progress. For example, if only HVAC work package installation is completed, but design is not completed and testing are not done, the PM can see exactly where the project stands instead of saying ICU is half done. Okay, ICU is half done is vague. It doesn't help client. Client will say, what do you mean? Where exactly? Well, like what is done, what is not done? You know that, okay, HVAC is done. Now you need to focus on testing part and you need to focus on, for example, design part. And then go talk to architects, go talk to inspectors and say, hey, what are you doing? We're behind the schedule. Go get the job done. You beep, sorry. Okay, so this is how WBS works. And to clear things up, let's have a question and see what type of question you may get from WBS on your final test. Mini question. Before getting into mini question, guys, keep this in mind that, okay, we talked about WBS in the previous slide and previous mini lesson, but it doesn't mean, I really mean it, it doesn't mean that this question's answer is also WBS, okay? So I want you to listen carefully and focus here. You're managing a 2-year predictive project to build a new corporate headquarters. The scope statement has been approved, but team leads now ask for clarity on their responsibilities, and the sponsor wants a detailed schedule. What should you do next to ensure both clarity and an accurate schedule? A. Begin drafting the project schedule based on milestone dates listed in the scope statement and assign tasks accordingly. B. Assign work based on similar past projects using historical data and expert judgment to avoid delays in scheduling. C. Consult the sponsor and provide a high-level roadmap while delaying task-level planning until team leads submit their estimate. D. Collaborate with team leads to decompose the approved scope into a WBS and work packages for accurate planning and task assignments. Please think for 5 seconds and answer it under 30 seconds. Okay, let's get it done together. The correct option is D. But why D, guys? Let's go line by line. Let's learn something from this question. Hey, teach us something. You're managing a 2-year predictive project. So our development approach is predictive, not agile or adaptive. What does this mean? It means we follow some processes. We do some processes. By doing some processes, I mean we take steps in a right order. We do things in a right order. The order of doing things is very important. And we don't care what project it is. It says the scope statement has been approved. So we have done define scope. Okay. And sponsor approved the scope statement. But team leads now ask for clarity on their responsibilities. Okay. Team leads doesn't know, okay, what should they do, on what work they should work on and concentrate. And the sponsor wants a detailed schedule. We said that to schedule, to budget, to assign resources, what do we need? We need smaller works. How do we get to those smaller works? By decomposing deliverables that we have in a scope statement. Okay, so what do we call that decomposed chart? WBS. So there are two concerns: task clarity and accurate schedule. Look option D. We collaborate with the team. Whenever you see the term collaborate, it means that option, you shouldn't eliminate that option. That option is strong option. By high chances, that option could be your correct option. So do not eliminate that option, because collaboration is a very key term in project manager. Every decision you want to make, you need to collaborate with the team as a project manager. Okay, so collaborate with the team leads to decompose the approved scope into a WBS and work packages for accurate planning and task assignments. I think that's a clear option. Why? Because we decompose those high-level deliverables into estimatable, manageable, assignable, and controllable work packages. Okay, these are smaller works. Now we can assign people, engineers, architects to different work packages. We can estimate how long each work package will take, how much each work package will cost us. Okay, so this is the right way to remove those two concerns: assignment clarity and accurate schedule. Now let's read the description. WBS, of course, converts approved high-level scope into detailed, actionable work, enabling accurate scheduling and resource planning. WBS also provides the foundation for the project schedule, resource assignments, and performance measurement. Remember, WBS had 4 benefits. We could assign people, we could estimate time, we could estimate cost, we could track progress. So WBS acts as a foundation document and chart. Okay, and also WBS ensures clarity for team leads and meets sponsors' need for a task level breakdown. But let's get into the reasons of why other options are incorrect. A, begin drafting the project schedule based on milestone dates. This is premature, guys. Okay, because without a WBS, task assignment and scheduling will lack structure and traceability, risking inaccuracies. We may have some high-level milestones. For example, by Q2 of 2027, you need to complete, for example, this deliverable. But this is very high level. Okay, we cannot build our schedule, our detailed schedule, on this high-level data. No, we have a tool called WBS. Why don't we use that WBS tool? That's why there is a process called Create WBS. And when do we start that process? Right after our scope statement is created. So when we say we need to do the processes and take some steps in the right order in predictive projects, we mean exactly like this. Okay, we do define a scope, so we create our scope statement. Now, based on that deliverables mentioned in the scope statement, we build our WBS, we create our WBS. Okay, this is how processes work. So A is incorrect and premature. B, assign work based on similar past projects using historical data. No, not two projects are same, guys. We cannot base our schedule on similar close projects. No, sponsor wants accurate schedule. Look at the last line. A sponsor wants an accurate schedule, not just close enough schedule. So option B is risky. While useful in estimating, if you don't have any data, if you can't break down deliverables into work packages, okay, this is the option. But it didn't mention in the question, so you can easily break down and create your WBS here. So while useful in estimating, this bypasses formal decomposition and can lead to scope gaps and overlaps, of course, because not two projects are same. C says consult the sponsor and provide a high-level roadmap while delaying. No, sponsor contacted you and asked for accurate schedule. You shouldn't provide high-level roadmap. Sponsor will be mad and fire you. Hey, get out of my office. You're not paid anymore and you're fired. Okay? So C is ineffective. Delaying decomposition hinders planning and coordination. Estimates must follow work definition. Awesome. This was a very, very good question, guys. Now, let's get into WBS's brother or child, which is WBS Dictionary, the second output of this process. All right, my beautiful friend, let's get into the next output of Create WBS process, which is WBS Dictionary. It's a supporting document with our WBS. We know WBS is hierarchy chart, okay? Have different levels. Now, each of those levels, especially work packages, have some details like who's responsible for that work package, how long that work package will take, how much will it cost, what resources that work package needs, what risks that work package have. We store all of these supporting information, okay? WBS is the just hierarchy chart with titles, but we keep supporting details about each of those about each of those work packages in a document called WBS Dictionary, okay? So WBS Dictionary is a document that explains each WBS element, each of those rectangles in hierarchy chart, okay? Its description, owner, deliverables, acceptance details, and lots of other details. Okay, let's have a sample document of WBS Dictionary, how it looks like. It looks like this, guys. We're going to have WBS ID, that code number, remember. Then the work package, okay, that green rectangles in WBS. Who's responsible to do that work package? For example, for work package called framing and interior construction, which has a WBS ID of 1.4.2.1, construction team is responsible, okay? Now, to what deliverable this work package connects, okay? For example, to deliverable inpatient care facility, which has a WBS ID of 1.4, okay? We get it from that chart, WBS chart. Then what's the acceptance criteria? Under what condition that work package considered done? When inspection tests are passed, when inspection inspect that deliverable, that framing and interior construction, and says, okay, good to go. When does that work package start? When it ends. For example, it starts in month 6 and ends in month 12. How much does that work package cost us? $12 million. What resources we need to complete that work package? For example, we need carpenters and materials. What quality that work package needs to meet? It must meet Ontario Code something. What risk does that work package have for the project? We have a risk of shortage of skilled trades, for example. To complete that work package, we have this risk. Then what's the milestones of that work package? For example, interior design or framing needs to be done by month 12, and then interior construction needs to be done by month X. These are like high-level milestones. And then notes, which has extra details about that work package. So we keep every single detail that we could in the WBS Dictionary. So why do we need one? Why do we need WBS Dictionary? Without a WBS Dictionary, different people, different project team members have different ideas about the same work package, okay? The dictionary makes sure everyone is on the same page. So everyone has access to WBS Dictionary and everyone could see, okay, who's responsible? Okay, what's the acceptance criteria? When does this start? And how much does it cost? Everyone is on the same page. And guys, remember, you are project manager, okay? You use principles, mindsets when doing processes, when creating documents with your team members. When creating WBS or WBS Dictionary, one principle that you need to apply is systems thinking. We had this term before. What does this mean? By system thinking, I mean you should know how every part of WPS connects to other parts of the project. So for WPS, we add details like a schedule, cost, risk, quality, acceptance criteria. So see, that scope connects to all other 9+1 pieces. You need to consider this principle of systems thinking. Awesome. This was about WBS Dictionary. So it's a supporting document for WBS. Now let's see what type of question you may get from WBS Dictionary. Mini question, my favorite part. As I said before, guys, when you see a question anywhere in your exam, here, anywhere, just a smile and say, hey, question, you're easy. I will get the right answer. Okay? Be confident. Let's get it done. You are a PM in a large predictive project with multiple functional teams. During quality inspection, the client rejects a deliverable, claiming it doesn't match the agreed scope. However, the responsible team insists they build it as interpreted from the WBS work package. You suspect the misunderstanding comes from unclear details about what the work package was supposed to produce and how completion was to be verified. What should you do first to resolve the issue? A. Review the requirement traceability matrix to verify which requirement the rejected deliverable was intended to satisfy. B. Review the WBS Dictionary to confirm the detailed description, deliverable content, and acceptance criteria for that work package. C. Review the scope statement to determine which high-level deliverables were included in the approved scope baseline. And D. Review the quality management plan to identify the quality standards and apply to the rejected deliverables. Guys, try to, of course, solve it yourself first. But now let's get it done together. Let's go line by line. You're a project manager of a predictive project. It's cool. It means it's a process-based, okay? We need to respect processes. We need to do the works in a right order. Okay. The problem starts from here. During quality inspection, the client rejects a deliverable, okay? It says this deliverable is bad. Why? It says it doesn't match the agreed scope, okay? The thing that team has made is different from the requested thing, from the agreed upon thing. Now, however, the responsible team, the project team that executed, insists that they build it as interpreted from the WBS work packages, okay? They blame WBS work packages. The first portion of question was talking about a scope statement somehow, okay? Because the client rejected a deliverable and said, hey, it doesn't match our promised list, that locked frozen document, the scope statement, remember? So the first portion talked about that. The second portion now, the executing team says, hey, I just made the deliverable based on work packages, okay? Don't blame me, blame work packages. Now, you as a project manager, you suspect that misunderstanding comes from unclear details about what the work package was supposed to produce and how completion was to be verified. Now, here's the most important part of the question, okay? You as a PM, you think the details we have put for every work package in WPS, where do we put the details? In WBS Dictionary. We keep all details about those WBS elements in WBS Dictionary. That's why the first action you should take, because you think the problem is with those details. So you should review WBS Dictionary first. Okay? This is the first action you do. That's why B is the correct option. Now, let's read the description. The WBS Dictionary, which is part of a scope baseline, which you will learn in just a few minutes, defines the detailed description of each work package, deliverables and acceptance criteria, responsible team, or person for completion and other details. Okay, it keeps details of WBS elements. Reviewing WBS Dictionary allows the PM to determine if the rejected deliverable matches what was formally defined and approved, clarifying the source of misalignment. This supports both scope validation and control by referencing the approved baseline, not team interpretation. Now, guys, let's see why other options are incorrect. A, review the requirement traceability matrix, RTM. Guys, RTM is GPS, tracker of requirements. Here, the question is talking about work packages, not high-level deliverables, not requirements, work packages. Specifically mentioned work packages. So, A does not make sense. RTM helps trace requirements to deliverables, but not detailed acceptance criteria or scope definitions within a work package. Okay, RTM does not include information about the work package. Why C is incorrect? C is very, very tempting, guys. Look at this. Review the scope statement, okay, to determine which high-level deliverables were included in the approved scope baseline. Very tempting, very good. But guys, the question, okay, look at the last three lines. You, as a project manager, you suspect the misunderstanding comes from unclear details about what the work package was supposed to produce. Okay, the question is about work package. Scope statement does not include information about work package. If the question was about deliverables, okay, the client rejected deliverable. Okay, and the question didn't mention anything about work package, anything about WBS or WBS Dictionary, then you should review scope statement, go to the acceptance criteria, and like in a meeting, you should show project manager and project team, hey, you guys didn't meet the acceptance criteria of this deliverable, that's why I rejected it. So you review scope statement in this case. But now, for this question, the question is clearly asking about details of work packages. So we need to review WBS Dictionary, not scope statement. Scope statement clarifies high-level boundaries and deliverables, but not the specific details that caused this misunderstanding. And D says review the quality management plan. No, quality management plan is how-to guide to deal with quality. We will get into details of quality management plan in quality part of the project. But for now, QMP or quality management plan describes quality standards and processes, not details about work packages. Great, this was a very good question. And finally, are you ready? We're going to cover scope baseline, the most important concept term when dealing with a scope in predictive projects. Let's get it done. Welcome to the third output of Create WBS process. Guys, here is the third document. And it's not a new document, okay? We combine three documents into one package and make this new document. Look up there. It's scope management in predictive projects. What phase? Still planning phase, okay? Hopefully, this is the last process we do in planning phase. And what process? Create WBS process, okay? What did we do so far? We create our WBS, that hierarchy chart. Then we created our WBS dictionary. Now, it's time to reveal and create scope baseline, guys. Scope baseline is combination of three documents. Scope statement, which we created in define scope process, remember, previous process. WBS, which we created in this process. WBS dictionary. So, scope baseline equals scope statement plus WBS dictionary. And we know scope statement has different sections like scope description, high-level deliverables, those acceptance criteria, constraints, assumptions, and other sections. WBS is that hierarchy chart. We have level 1, which was high-level deliverables, then control account, then work packages, which were estimatable, controllable, manageable, assignable. And then WBS dictionary, which is a supporting document for WBS and includes details about each WBS element. So Guys, scope baseline is the official approved version of the project scope. You may say, okay, scope statement was it. Scope statement was the same promised list of scope that we will deliver. You're right. But the difference is scope statement was high-level document, guys. But scope baseline also includes WBS and WBS Dictionary. So those minor details, okay, not just high-level deliverables, also details and information about smaller works called work packages. That's why scope baseline is more comprehensive than scope statement. But if you're saying scope statement was that promised list, you are right. I can't say you're wrong. No, you're right. But remember, scope baseline includes scope statement plus 2 other detailed documents to support that scope statement. Okay, so it's what the project team and stakeholders agree on as the foundation for all future work. Now, why we need scope baseline? Guys, this baseline is what the PM uses to measure, control, and protect the scope. Okay, if changes are requested later, if a stakeholder comes in to add a scope, add a work requirement to the project, they must go through formal change control to update the scope baseline. Okay, because any change, when change comes in, we need to assess that change, like how it affects our project. Okay, then we show this assessment to CCB, Change Control Board, and then they decide to accept it, delay it, reject that request, whatever they want, based on time, budget, and other criteria. So scope baseline is parent of scope statement. And guys, remember, we're going to have 3 baselines in the project. We're going to have scope baseline, which you're seeing right now. We're going to have schedule baseline, and we're going to have cost baseline. These 3 baselines, which are part of project management plan, okay, these 3 baselines are very, very important. Okay, any change, any request comes from a client, sponsor, stakeholder. Okay, when changes come, you assess. And if that change control board approves that change, you need to update these 3 baselines. While combining those 3 documents, scope statement, WBS, and WBS Dictionary, to create a scope baseline, remember to apply principle of stewardship. Okay, you must protect this baseline as the official scope agreement. Treat the baseline like contract. Okay, any change to that baseline needs negotiation, needs approval. Nobody can just go and change that baseline. The same thing that we said about the scope statement. Okay, guys, great. So whatever we said about scope statement also applies to scope baseline. What did we say about the scope statement? That scope statement is the promised list, official list. We lock that document when a sponsor approves project scope statement. Same thing goes here, because project scope statement is part of scope baseline. Okay, scope baseline includes that plus 2 other detailed documentations. Great. Now let's see what type of question you may get from scope baseline. Excuse me, did you say you want a mini question? Here we go. Your wish is my command. So let's get it done. You are a project manager in the execution phase of a predictive project. Okay, a stakeholder complains that one of the delivered components was not part of the approved scope, while the responsible team argues it was included in an early draft version of the plan. You need to confirm exactly what work was formally approved as part of the project scope before taking corrective action or processing a change request. What should you review first? A. Project charter. B. Requirements traceability matrix. C. Scope baseline. D. Requirements document or list. Very good question. I feel like I got exact same question on my PMP exam. So please try to solve it yourself first. And if you didn't get it right, that's totally fine. But I'm sure you got it right. I mean, I'm a magician. I can read your mind. I'm sure you got it right. You're smiling right now, aren't you? You're smiling. Okay, let's go line by line, guys. The correct option is scope baseline, C, okay? But why C? Let's go line by line. Learn something from this question. You are a project manager in the execution phase of a predictive project. Nice. This question is giving up the development approach. Predictive. It means we follow processes. We respect the order of doing things. Now, a stakeholder complains that one of the delivered components, so there is a ready deliverable. The team has completed a deliverable. A stakeholder, a client, complains that this deliverable wasn't in the list, wasn't in approved agreement. Okay? So you as a PM, where should you review to see if this deliverable was in that list or no? Of course, a scope statement or a scope baseline. If scope statement was one of the options, the correct option were both a scope baseline and a scope statement. Okay, because the scope statement is part of scope baseline, guys. Guys, remember, what did we say about the scope statement? We set a meeting, workshops. We agree with the stakeholders and our client and a sponsor on list of things that team will deliver and do. Okay, sponsor and stakeholders, that high-level decision makers, agree and sign off. They approve this list. Now this list is frozen. Okay, your team have to build from that list. Your team should not build something that is not in that list. And remember, your team should not work on version 1, version 2 of scope baseline. No, final version, approved version. You should start working on approved version. There's only one approved version. Your team cannot say, hey, we have worked, this work was in early draft version. No, stakeholder doesn't care. You are fired. Your team is fired, okay? There is only one final scope baseline or scope statement version, guys. And you start working once that version is approved. Once the one who pays you, sponsor, approves the work you want to do. Great. That's why scope baseline is correct. Let's read the description. The scope baseline is the approved version of the detailed project scope and includes the scope statement, WBS, and WBS Dictionary. We know that. Reviewing the scope baseline confirms whether the disputed component was formally approved or is an authorized addition or scope creep. Scope baseline is the official reference for verifying, validating, and controlling scope during project execution. Okay, so if there is any disputes about deliverables, you go and check a scope baseline because your answer is in scope baseline. But why other options are incorrect? A, project charter. Guys, project charter defines very, very high level deliverables and objectives, lacks the detail needed to verify approved scope boundaries. No. Scope statement and scope baseline comes after collecting all requirements, but project charter is developed as one of the very first documents. Okay, we create business case, benefits management plan, then project charter. We didn't collect like all requirements yet. Scope baseline and scope statement is that official reference. RTM tracks requirements. It's GPS tracker for our requirements. Does not relate to this question, okay? It tracks requirements to deliverables, but does not include like those approved list of scope. And requirement documentation, requirement list, it's for collect requirement step, guys. Okay, we collected our requirement. Now, from heart of that requirement, we came up with the list, which we call scope. Okay, and sponsor and key decision makers approved that list. And then that list is locked and frozen. And any change to that list will go through formal change control channels. That's why C is correct. And this was a very good question. Guys, when you hear the term output, we don't mean just create new documents. Okay, so far, we developed new documents in each output of each of those 4 processes. Okay. Sometimes output means updating existing documents. For example, one of the outputs of the Create WBS process is updating requirement traceability metrics. When did we create requirement traceability metrics? In collect requirement process, remember? So RTM is already existing document. I'm not sure if you remember, but I hope you do. RTM it's a matrix and it's a table, okay? That table had different columns. One of those columns were WBS ID, and then another one was deliverable. Now it's the time to fill up the WBS ID column of the RTM for each requirement. Okay, so we know RTM. RTM is GPS tracker of each requirement. Now that we created our WBS, now that we know details about each work packages, okay, we need to connect all of those single requirements in requirement list and requirement traceability metrics to WBS and deliverables. We need to make sure that all of those requirements that stakeholder wanted and needed are considered. So this is a typical updated version of RTM, or requirement traceability metrics. The first column is requirement ID, okay, and then requirement description, and then source. This is, we had it before in collect requirement process. Now, WBS ID. Now, we know that, for example, bid pharmacy and imaging lab requirement relates to WBS ID of 1.1 and deliverable pharmacy labs, okay? Or second requirement relates to WBS ID 1.3 and deliverable, for example, parking facility. Okay, so we need RTM updates to keep every requirement traceable to a work package. Okay, we check it after WBS creation to confirm that all of those approved requirements are considered and are added to WBS. And remember, guys, when you're updating RTM, you need to apply one principle as project manager. What's that principle? Focus on value. Okay, you need to ensure every WBS element supports a real approved requirement. Nothing extra, nothing nonsense. Okay, so every piece of work should trace back to a real need, real requirement. Every single of those work packages we have WBS ID needs to connect somehow to the requirements, because requirements are our foundation. Requirements are stakeholders' voices, their needs, expectations. This is what our client, the one who pays us, wants from us. Okay, so the work we do, which are those work packages, need to relate to those requirements. That's why RTM exists, and that's why RTM is living document. We need to update RTM once a new information comes in. In this process, a new information is those WBS ID or those deliverable list. Okay, that's why RTM is updated here. Awesome, guys. This was a wonderful process. And guess what? We're done with scope management in planning phase. But here we're not done yet with Create WBS process. We're gonna have mini FAQs. I'm sure there are still some remaining concepts, concerns that making you crazy. You have some questions. I'm gonna solve those questions. Let's get into mini FAQs. Mini FAQs of Create WBS process. Let's get into question number 1. Why is it called baseline? Scope baseline, why baseline? Guys, baseline means frozen version you measure deviations against. Okay, so once scope baseline is approved, it becomes the fixed reference point. Okay, baselines means fixed reference point used to measure performance. Any future scope changes must go and compare to that baseline. That's reference point. That's why it is called baseline, because it's a reference point. Question number 2, is the work breakdown structure shared with the customer? No, guys. Customer doesn't care about work breakdown structure. It's an internal document, okay? The WBS is an internal project management document used by the project team for planning and controlling. So customers typically receive deliverables and scope summaries, not the detailed WBS. Question number 3, what's the smallest level of the WBS called and what does it represent? I know you know it, that it is called work packages, the lowest level of decomposition in the WBS. So work package level is the level where time and cost can be estimated and work can be assigned and tracked. So work package level is estimatable, controllable, assignable, trackable, okay? Next question, what are the key characteristics of a high quality work breakdown structure or WBS? There are 3 characteristics that each good WBS should have. Number 1, it should be deliverable oriented, okay? It focuses on what will be delivered because the first level is all deliverables. Second one, it is hierarchy, okay? It breaks work down from high-level deliverables into smaller manageable components. Third one, 100% rule. It captures all project work, ensuring nothing is missing and no extra work is included. That's very important. Question number 5. How do we know when to stop decomposing the WBS? I think we mentioned that. Guys, we stop decomposing when that work package, that small deliverable can be estimated. I mean, time and cost-wise, okay? Can be assigned to one owner or one team, can be verified and accepted as complete. Guys, remember, I want to remove this confusion. The first level of WBS is high-level deliverables from scope statement, okay? And then we have control account and then work packages. Those work packages are also considered deliverables, okay? Don't get me wrong here, but these are smaller deliverables. Okay, these are deliverables that can be assigned and estimated. Customer or sponsor or inspector can come in and see that work package and verify it, accept it, or decline it. So we decomposed till the time that we could estimate, assign owner, verify that deliverable, and accept that deliverable. Question number 6, who approves the final WBS and scope baseline? Usually project sponsor or steering committee. After review by the PM team and key stakeholders, it is approved once everyone agrees. This defines the complete work to deliver the project. All key decision making, all key approvals are done by sponsor, steering committee, or those key stakeholders who pay for our project. Next question, do agile or hybrid projects have a scope baseline? Usually no formal scope baseline, guys, in pure agile projects especially. What do we have in agile? Product backlog, okay? It's dynamic and continuously refined. But in hybrid projects, you may have light version of scope baseline for that predictive part, of course. Next one, why does PMBOK place Create WBS after define a scope? Okay, why this order? Why not Create WBS then define a scope? I think this is a very stupid question that I put there. I don't know why I did. Because you can't break down what's not already defined. I mean, if we don't know our deliverable, our scope, what do you want to break down? In Create WBS, we break down that deliverable. You need to have that deliverable. How do you have that? How do you have that deliverable? By doing define a scope process. Okay, Nav, you're very stupid. Why did you put this question here? I thought, maybe sometimes the students are confused. Please forgive me. Next one, what happens if a deliverable is missed or unclear in the WBS? Okay, it won't appear in cost, schedule, or resource planning, meaning it likely won't be delivered. If we miss something, it won't be delivered. I mean, our team won't even know such a thing exists to make it happen. Okay, that's why WBS completeness, that 100% rule, is very important. And that's why we get stakeholders' approval before starting work. We are in planning phase. Remember, look up there, guys. We are in planning phase. We haven't started our work yet. Okay, We create our WBS scope baseline and everything. We show it to customer. Customer needs to approve it. Customer need to check and see, okay, all of my requirements are here. It's fine, go ahead. Okay, so we should avoid missing something. If something important is missed, I mean, we need to go through lots of steps, through formal change control processes, and it will get messy. I think you will get fired if you miss a requirement, okay? Don't miss requirements. Question number 10, what's the starting point for creating an effective WBS? Guys, the very, very first starting point is, of course, project charter, okay? Because it provides a high-level definition of scope and deliverables, which supports top-down decomposition when developing the WBS. Of course, we develop WBS based on a scope statement. But remember, guys, project charter is the first document that includes these high-level deliverables, high-level goals, okay? If you get a question like this, and in the options you didn't have scope baseline, scope statement, the right answer is project charter, because project charter is the first document that includes the highest level of project deliverables. Then, yeah, we have scope statement, of course. Question number 11. What should a PM do when the team wants to change the WBS without affecting baselines? Okay, we said we have 3 baselines, guys. Scope baseline, which we learned, and schedule and cost baselines, which we will learn in their parts of the tutorial, okay? Not now, but we have 3 baselines. Now, the question is saying our team member wants to change something in WBS chart that won't affect these 3 baselines. What should PM do? For such a changes, project manager should facilitate a team discussion to evaluate the proposed WBS change, ensuring it preserves scope integrity and coordinating adjustments only if the change is justified and does not impact approved baselines. Guys, sometimes mid-project, team members have cool ideas, okay? Now, you as a PM, should you reject those ideas and say, hey, team member, just shut up. I'm your manager. Just do your job. Don't be creative. I don't need your ideas. Should be like this manager, or you should just facilitate a team discussion for 15 minutes, for example, and ask that team member, hey, why don't you come up here and explain your idea? Maybe that idea helps us in the project. Maybe that idea helps us save time, save money for the project. Okay, because different minds are better than one mind, guys. Everybody has some sort of creativity in themselves, okay? You need to nurture this open discussions. So you always facilitate team discussions for such decisions, because at the end of the day, you as a project manager, you should know that this is your team that does the job, not you. You manage them. They do the job, okay? So you need to respect to them, to their ideas, because they know details better than you. You're just manager. Okay, great. So as long as it does not affect baselines, you don't have to go through like change control process. Okay, you just need to throw meeting, and every team member needs to agree on that new idea and says, okay, just change that WBS chart like whatever way you want. If it helps the project, why not? But if it affects those 3 baselines in even any little way, that request and that change needs to be assessed and go through formal change control process. Next one, what should a PM do if during scope and WBS development, they notice a functionality could also benefit another project? Okay, so you are working in an organization. That organization has several projects, and you are aware of other projects' goal also. Okay, you're doing your define a scope process or create WBS process, and you notice, this deliverable also is deliverable in another project. This happens, guys, because projects sometimes share some goals. Okay, so what should you do? The project manager should record this situation as opportunity in the risk register. Guys, we're gonna talk about risk in the risk portion of course, our tutorial, our PMP tutorial. But risk is a good event or bad event that affects our project. Risks are not always bad. Okay, that good part of that good risk is called opportunity. And we record all of these bad events and good events that may happen, not happened, that may happen in a document called risk register. Okay, we're going to get into risk register at the right time, but here's just an overview. Okay, so you as a project manager, you should record that opportunity in the risk register and then discuss it with the other project's sponsor and team using systems thinking. For example, while defining a scope, the PM realizes a reporting module being built could also be used by another project. Okay, so the PM logs it as an opportunity and meets with the other project team or other project team's PM to explore shared use or alignment. Next one, what should a project manager do when missing a scope is discovered mid-project? This happens, and it is very bad in predictive projects. In Agile and Adaptive, you welcome these missed developments, okay? This missed features, it's fine. But in predictive, it makes things very hard, okay? But the project manager should initiate formal change control to properly update the WBS and scope baseline, okay? Ensuring the additional work is approved and controlled. If something is missed, you initiate formal change control process, okay? You assess the impact of that missing thing, and then you update relevant documents like scope baseline and of course work breakdown structure, because that thing, that missing requirements need to be in our WBS. So our team should know about that missing thing. So how do our team know about that? By looking at the WBS. Next one, why must the WBS always reflect the complete and accurate scope of the project? Why it should be constantly updated? So guys, this is why we say we update scope baseline, because scope baseline includes scope statement and WBS Dictionary. Okay, we don't just say let's update scope statement if a request comes mid-project. Okay, we don't say just update the scope statement. We say update the scope baseline, because WBS always need to reflect the complete work, because the WBS defines all the work to be done, and if it is incomplete or inaccurate, it can lead to missing work, scope gaps, cost overruns, and schedule issues, and the sponsor will get mad and you will get fired, and it is not good, guys. Okay, awesome. This was the last question, and we have learned lots of things so far about this process. This was a long process. We learned decomposition, we learned WBS Dictionary. We created and combined all those three documents, and now we know what scope baseline is. But I have good news, guys. Before your exam, just one day before your exam, please review all of mini summaries. Welcome to mini summary of Create WBS process. Look up there, scope management in predictive projects, still planning phase, and the process of Create WBS. What did we do exactly? PM and team splitted the project deliverables, which were extracted from scope statement, into smaller pieces and built WBS. And then we added some details to each element of WBS. And then we combined three documents and built a reference point. Awesome. We started by extracting information from existing docs, like those inputs: scope statement, requirements management plan, scope management plan, RTM, requirement list, OPA, EEF, and then we used expert judgment and a new tool and technique called decomposition. What was decomposition? Decomposition means breaking down those high-level deliverables into smaller and manageable components, okay? It helps organize work clearly and assign responsibilities effectively. As a result of reviewing all of those inputs and applying different tools and techniques, we created three documents. Number one, WBS. It's a hierarchy breakdown chart that includes all the total project work, okay? it has different levels. Level 1 was high-level deliverables, which we extracted from scope statement. Then we had control account. Then we had work packages. Work packages were the smallest level in WBS, okay? Those work packages were manageable, controllable, estimatable, and assignable. Then each WBS elements have some details like when do they start, how much they cost, who's responsible for them, then what risk they have, acceptance criteria. These details are recorded in a document called WBS Dictionary. Then we combined 3 documents: scope statement, which was output of defined scope process, then WBS and WBS Dictionary. These 3 documents are combined to make scope baseline. Scope baseline is our freezed and fixed reference point for scope. If mid-project a stakeholder requests something and this something is scope related, you evaluate that request. You find the impact of that request on project. Then you provide those details to change control board. And if change control board approves that request and that change, you update scope baseline. By updating scope baseline, you're exactly updating 3 documents: scope statement, WBS, and WBS Dictionary. You don't just update scope statement, you're updating all 3 documents, because WBS should reflect the total updated work. And while doing this Create WBS process, you're applying systems thinking. What's systems thinking, guys? It means when creating work packages, you need to consider how this work package affect other 9+1 or 8+1 pieces of the project. This is a scope, but this scope affects schedule, affect cost, quality, risk, procurement, everything. Okay, so you as a PM, you need to apply systems thinking. You need to respect other pieces of the project and consider those too. And of course, always you focus on value. What does it mean? It means that work package, that smallest part in WBS, needs to add value to our project, okay? You shouldn't have some nonsense work packages there. Awesome, this was a very great mini summary. Now, let's have a couple of practice test questions. So far, after mini summaries, we only had just 1 practice test, okay? But since this process is very important because it is actually concluded our planning into scope baseline, we're going to have maybe 4 or 5 or maybe more questions. Let's get them done together. You're a project manager newly assigned to a project. The sponsor has approved the initiative, and now the team is preparing to begin planning the project's scope in more detail. During the first planning workshop, a team member asks what document should be referenced as the official starting point for developing the work breakdown structure. What should you use? A. Scope baseline. B. Project management plan. C. Project charter. And D. WBS Dictionary. Try to solve it yourself first. And I think you got it right. And the correct option is C. Project charter. But let's go line by line and learn something from this practice test. It says you're a project manager newly assigned to a project. New project manager. Congratulations, by the way. The sponsor, okay, has approved the initiative. The sponsor has approved the project, okay, and you have been assigned. So it means that the project charter is created and you've been assigned as the project manager of this initiative, this project, okay? And we know project charter includes and involves high-level deliverables. Now, the team is preparing to begin planning the project's scope, okay? The team has not created any document related to scope in planning. They haven't started planning yet. They're preparing to start. This is a very important statement in the question, okay? So let's eliminate some options. When do we create scope baseline? As a result of doing Create WBS process. So scope baseline also includes a scope statement, WBS, and WBS Dictionary. We haven't developed any of them yet. We haven't begun any planning for scope yet. Team is preparing to begin. So A does not make sense. And also, the question is looking for a starting point to create WBS. WBS hasn't been created yet. And WBS is part of a scope baseline. How can you use a document as a starting point that hasn't been created yet? Doesn't make sense. Project management plans, guys. Project management plan includes those how-to guides, okay? Does not deal with scope, does not include high-level deliverables. No, it's just how-to guide plus those three baselines we talked about: scope, cost, and schedule baselines, plus development approach. It does not make sense here, okay? So it's a comprehensive document that integrates all subsidiary plans. The other option was WBS Dictionary. We need to make WBS first, and then we need to make its supporting document, which is WBS Dictionary. Okay, so we know WBS Dictionary provides detailed descriptions of WBS elements and components, and it is developed after WBS, not before. And a scope baseline developed after creating WBS and WBS Dictionary, not before. So the right answer is Project Charter. Let's read the description. The Project Charter is the first document that provides high-level project scope and deliverables. That's correct, guys. It authorizes the project and establishes boundaries that guide the creation of scope statement and WBS. So Project Charter is the very first initial point. If the question said, okay, scope statement is ready, scope statement is your starting point, okay? But the question says the team hasn't started planning for scope yet. So your starting point is Project Charter in this case. Since the scope baseline is not developed, the charter is the logical starting point for decomposing scope. Great. Let's get the next one. You are a project manager who has recently taken over a system upgrade project already in its execution phase. While reviewing the approved work breakdown structure, WBS, and comparing it with recent stakeholder discussions and technical documentation, you identify two key components that were not included in the original WBS, but are necessary to meet the product requirements. Additionally, some team members have started informal work on these components, assuming they were part of the original plan. What should you do next to ensure the project scope remains controlled and only authorized work is performed? A. Stop the informal work immediately and initiate a formal change request to update the WBS. B. Direct the team to continue working since the components are necessary and clearly align with project goals. C. Roll the components into existing WBS deliverables without modifying the WBS to avoid project delays. And D. Consult the sponsor and key stakeholders to seek verbal approval before formalizing the change. This is a very, very good question. Please try to solve it yourself. Pause the video. And I'm sure, I believe in you. You will solve it and you will get me the correct option. Now, let's go line by line, guys. It says you are a project manager assigned to a project that is in the execution phase. What does this mean? It means we have passed initiating phase, we have passed planning phase, we are now in executing phase, okay? What does it mean that we have passed planning phase? It means we have developed our scope statement, we have developed our WBS Dictionary. It means we have developed, we know our scope baseline and other 8+1 pieces of the project. Everything about planning is done. While reviewing the approved work breakdown structure, okay, when we create WBS in planning, we got approval from a sponsor. You as a PM, you review that approved WBS. You notice something odd and weird. Two very important components, very important requirements are missed, are not in that list, okay? And these two are very important, essential. It says necessary to meet the product requirements. But your team is working on it
like they thought it was in the WBS work. Remember, guys, you as a PM, you should not authorize your team to work on something that is not officially approved. We don't care if that something that your team is working on helps the project or not. If it is not in the approved list, approved scope statement or WBS, your team should not work. That's why we have the term called control scope. You as a it's your responsibility. You as a project manager, you need to protect and control the scope. You shouldn't allow scope creep. What does a scope creep? Unauthorized additional work. Okay? In this case, in our case, luckily, it helped the project. But what if it was against our project and it was nonsense and does not relate to our project, this work that the team is doing, unauthorized work? Okay, so you need to protect and control your scope, and you should not allow your team to work on something that is not in the list. Now, guys, remember, when we create our scope baseline and get approval from sponsor and key decision makers, any change to this scope baseline, okay, there are some missed requirements, two expectations. It is missed. It is not in our initial approved scope baseline. Okay. Now, in predictive projects, guys, we always go through formal change control to update baselines. We need to get approval from CCB or sponsor, and then update our baselines and start working. Okay. That's why the correct option is A, guys. Stop the informal work immediately. You should not allow your team to work on something that is not approved, okay? And initiate a formal change request to update the WBS. This is the best approach you should take as a PM in this scenario, okay? Let's read the description, guys. Missing work in the WBS must be formally added through change control, even if it seems necessary. That work seems necessary, okay? We don't care if it's necessary or not. Always, after the initial scope baseline is approved, it is locked, frozen. Any change to it needs to go through formal change control. This option A, prevents scope creep and ensures no unauthorized work is performed. Now you're preventing from future same mistakes. Your team will now know that, hey, you shouldn't work on unauthorized works, okay? And option A also aligns with scope management best practices. So no work should be done unless it is formally scoped. This is best practice. Let's go and see why other options are incorrect, guys. Option B says direct the team to continue working. No, you should not do that, okay? It violates scope control. You should control the scope. But option B is not controlling scope. It is allowing a scope creep, which is not cool. So it violates the scope control. Unauthorized work is scope creep, regardless of intent, okay? Option C says roll the components into existing WBS deliverables without modifying the WBS deliverable. No, WBS should always reflect the total project work. 100% rule, always. We don't say we just update the scope statement. We say we update the scope baseline. It means all those three documents are updated, and WBS always needs to be updated and align and reflect total project work, okay? So option C is misleading. This hides the gap and causes traceability issues, understanding WBS integrity and scope tracking. Remember, guys, if we don't update WBS, okay, we track requirements with RTM, remember? And in the RTM chart and table, we have WBS ID column. And stakeholders track their requirements through RTM. If they go through their requirements and see, okay, what's the update? They go to the WBS and check it, okay? Because there is a WBS ID. And if we don't update WBS ID, it means we didn't care about their request because nothing is updated. And why D is incorrect, it says consult the sponsor and key stakeholders to seek verbal approval. No, there is no verbal approval in predictive projects, guys. Everything is formal, okay? So verbal approvals is not compliant with formal change control. It bypasses PMO governance, and creates accountability issues. Everything needs to be recorded because every signature has a weight. Okay, if something happens in the future, we go and review those documents, those signed approvals and documents. By verbal, nobody admits that they have done something wrong. Awesome. Let's get the next one. You're managing a system upgrade project in a large organization. The project scope statement has been formally approved by the sponsor, and the original work breakdown structure, or WBS, has been baselined. A few weeks into execution, the engineering and design leads jointly approach you, requesting to restructure the WBS to group deliverables differently. They assure you that this change does not affect the scope, cost, or schedule. It's purely to align with their team's internal processes. However, you're aware that modifying the WBS after baseline can create confusion for external reporting and earned value tracking. What should you do next as the project manager? A. Reject the request as the WBS has already been baselined and must remain unchanged unless scope changes. B. Facilitate a team discussion to evaluate the proposed change, ensuring it preserves scope integrity and coordinating adjustments if justified. C. Make the WBS adjustments internally as long as the scope remains the same and the changes do not affect stakeholder deliverables. And D. Forward the change request to the sponsor for approval, since the scope statement is already signed off. Very, very good question, and I want you to get the correct option yourself first. If you haven't, no worries at all. You won't walk alone. You're with me in good hands. Pause the video if you want to think. If you don't, let's go line by line. Let's learn something from this question. At the end of the day, these practices are here to teach us something, okay? You're managing a system upgrade project in a large organization. So our organization is very big and large, multiple departments probably. The project scope statement has been formally approved by this. So our scope statement is approved and ready, okay? Original work breakdown structure has been baseline. Okay, so scope statement, WBS and WBS Dictionary is approved and baseline. It means scope baseline is approved. Okay, awesome. A few weeks into execution, so before execution, we're not executing yet. A few weeks into execution, the engineering and design leads jointly approach you. So two team leads approach you and say they want to restructure WBS to group deliver. So they want to have a different format of or different layout of WBS. They promise you that that the scope baseline, schedule baseline, and the cost baseline won't change. Okay, they just want to have different format. Now, they ensure you think that this change does not affect the, okay. It's purely to align with their team's internal processes. However, you're aware that modifying the WBS after baseline can create confusion for external reporting. So there's no just internal reporting, there are sometimes external reporting. You need to report to key stakeholders or, for example, regulatory bodies and earn value track. What should you do? Option A says reject the request. Guys, in tutorials, I have told you that whenever you see strong negative word like reject, okay, that option is incorrect. Reject the request. No. Two team leads came to you. They want to change WBS format. Why? Because they want to work smoothly, okay? Because the new format helps them work better. Why should you reject before analyzing and assessing? So A is incorrect, okay? I don't want to read the rest of the A's statement. It says, as the WBS has already been baseline and remain unchanged unless... No, we can change WBS if necessary. So A is incorrect. B, facilitate a team discussion to evaluate the proposed change. Nice. It's collaborative. You facilitate the meeting, you gather everyone, and you evaluate the change. This is nice. So you're considering different perspectives here. That's fine and nice. So you evaluate the proposed change, ensuring it preserves scope integrity. So those two team leads, they said scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baseline does not change. But now with this meeting, you're ensuring that it won't change. Scope integrity, okay? You're protecting scope integrity. It's a nice thing to do. And coordinating adjustment justified. So if necessary, to those external bodies that use these WBS formats, you can coordinate with them too. Like after you evaluate and after you see that, okay, this reformatting, restructuring helps the project. Why not? Let's do it, okay? You need to coordinate with those external bodies too. It's a good option. We consider that, okay? We're not sure. Option C, make the WBS adjustment internally. Guys, there is just one WBS. There's no two WBSs. One for internal team and one for external team. No. That internally term here does not make sense. And that makes us eliminate this option. Make the WBS adjustment internally as long as the scope remains the same and the changes do not affect stakeholder deliverables. No. Option C lacks transparency and skips formal evaluation of change impacts. Okay? We need to, it says go and adjust WBS. No, you need to analyze the impact of this restructuring first. Option C does not say about that. And option D, forward the change request to the sponsor. You as a PM, you need to evaluate that request first. Look at option B, facilitates a meeting, talk with team member, gather all inputs and different perspectives, evaluating their requests, if that helps our project, if not, see, and then you need to like go and integrate the change control process and then involve the stakeholders. Sponsors. Sponsors are paying you to take care of these steps and headaches, okay? So option D involves the sponsor unnecessarily. Their role is to approve scope change, not structural formatting decisions. In this case, two team leads just wanted to restructure WBS, and it won't affect the scope, schedule, and cost baselines. So just do it yourself, wrap it up yourself, okay? Let's get the next one. You're managing a predictive project to launch a new product line across multiple global regions. During WBS development, you conducted individual interviews with team leads from marketing, logistics, and manufacturing to identify deliverables and break them into work packages. After finalizing the WBS and beginning schedule development, you noticed that similar promotional tasks were listed under both marketing and logistics, causing confusion and overlap in responsibilities. What should you have done differently to prevent redundancy in the WBS and ensure better coordination across departments? A. Conducted a joint WBS review sessions with all departments to align deliverables and eliminate overlaps. B. Used expert judgment to assign tasks more accurately between departments. C. Created a responsibility assignment matrix to define roles before developing the WBS. And D. Set up communication protocols to clarify scope boundaries before scheduling tasks. Good question. Please pause the video, read the question, and try to answer it under 30 seconds, okay? Let's go line by line and try to learn something from this question. You're managing a predictive project. So our development approach is giving up by the question. It's predictive. When we see predictive, it means you need to respect processes. When you respect processes, I mean you need to take steps or do things in a right order, okay? That order of doing things matter here. So it's a predictive project to launch a new product across multiple regions. So it's a big project and it affects multiple regions and different stakeholders, okay? During WBS development, You conducted individual interviews, okay? Not just one workshop with all its stakeholders. No, individual interviews with team leads from 3 different departments, okay? So you sit down with marketing, you sit down with logistics, and you sit down with manufacturing team, and you guys then develop like WBS for that, WBS for this, and and then the PM wrapped up all of these WBS and come up with the final WBS. But the problem is there are some overlapping, okay? Different team leads like confused about the responsibilities, who does what. And now the question is asking, what should have done differently? Okay, if you go back, what should you do now to prevent this concern, this WBS redundancy, and ensuring better coordination across departments and avoiding those overlapping? What does A say? A say conducted a joint WB instead of like interviewing differently one by one. Joint. Everybody, you gather everybody, okay? Conducted a joint WBS review session with all departments to align deliverables so everybody's aligned and agreed, and eliminate overlaps. We consider this option. This option sounds like a good option, okay? We're not sure. Let's see. Option B, used expert judgment to assign tasks more accurately. Guys, expert judgment is good, okay? But remember, assigning task is not the issue here, okay? The problem is redundancy during WBS development, okay? Which requires team collaboration, not just SME input. SME won't do the job for you, okay? Your team needs to get the job done, not SME or expert, okay? The coordination is poor here. There are some overlapping, okay? Everyone is not aligned. Everyone needs to have a bird view of project and be on the same page. Everybody is not on the same page. This is the problem. Experts' input, no, does not help. Let's eliminate option B. So far, option A was better. C, created a responsibility assignment matrix. Guys, responsibility assignment matrix, RAM or RACI, which is child of RAM. These are created after the WBS is finalized, not before, because you need to know what work our team will do and then assign tasks based on the available work, based on the work that we're going to work on and do, okay? So RACI chart or RAM is not developed before WBS. So RACI matrices are created after the WBS is finalized to define who does what. They don't prevent WBS redundancy, which is our problem here. Let's go to option D, set up communication protocols to clarify scope boundaries before scheduling tasks. Guys, the problem was lack of collaborative WBS review, not general communications. This option is just focusing on communication part of the project. No, our problem is scope. If you as a PM, you have conducted a joint WBS review, in that review, every concern would be removed. Everyone would be on the same page and agreed on who does what. Okay, so option A is the best option. Let's read the description, guys. Joint WBS review session allows cross-functional alignment, ensuring that deliverables are not duplicated across departments. Group sessions promote consensus and shared understanding, which reduces redundancy, aligns with best practices for WBS validation before finalization. And we talked about why other options were incorrect. Awesome.